This is Dr. Chris's Radio Horror, 91.3 FM, WCUW in Worcester, Massachusetts. And tonight on the show, Jess O'Lantern returns to the show for her co-hosting duties after her Christmas break. Hello, Jess.
Huzzah!
And we have on the show one of the stars of Fright Night Part 2, the amazing and talented Juilie Carmen. Thank you for coming on the show with us, Julie.
Hi, Chris, and hello, Jess. Nice to talk to
Hi.
you. Worcester, Massachusetts. Are you near Salem?
I am like probably an hour drive from Salem.
I see. Well, we did a whole tour of Salem. Fascinating stories there about what really went on.
Cool.
And I saw The Crucible on Broadway this year. The Crucible is quite an important story in American history.
Did you by chance happen to see The Witch?
Did I see the film The Witch?
Yes.
No, I didn't. But I liked hearing all the stories about how a lot of women inherited their families' homes when their parents died, and then in order to confiscate them and take their lands, the powers that be in the banks and the mayor and all would say the woman was a witch, and they would confiscate her land, and it was really a power grab. And also the women's cats were burned with them, and it was just a fear-based power grab. It was really interesting going on all the tours through Salem. So I bring it up because it sounds like your radio station is right in that area.
Like I said, it's about an hour from Salem, and we're near Rhode Island, too, which is the home of H.P. Lovecraft.
Yes, H.P. Lovecraft. So, anyway, I'm not sure what you are... Tonight, I don't have anything... Well, anyway, cut that part out. Do you want to just start asking questions, or how would you like
Yes. Are you happy that Fright Night Part 2 has gotten kind of like a revitalization in the public's eye with the release of the documentary, You're So Cool, Brewster?
Yes, the documentary You're So Cool, Brewster is something that was made by a group of film lovers in the UK and called cultscreenings.co.uk, and they contacted my agents and said that they were making a long-form 3-hour documentary on the making of Fright Night Part 2, and would I want to participate. So we taped an interview a year ago on the hottest day of the year in a tiny, crowded office, but I got Joseph Porro to come, who did all the costumes, and he also is the great costume designer of Salem, the series on TV. Joseph Porro came to the taping. Wouldn't be on camera, but we got some stills. And it was just fun to reminisce. Fright Night Part 2 was a film that we did in 1988, and Tommy Lee Wallace directed it. The original concept and first script and film were written and directed by Tom Holland. The cast was Roddy McDowell and William Ragsdale. Tracy Lynn played the ingenue, and I played Regine Dandridge. And the storyline was that Regine, for the people who haven't seen the film, because it had limited release for a whole murder story on its own, but Regine was coming back to taunt William Ragsdale because allegedly he killed my brother Jerry Dandridge, played by Chris Sarandon in Fright Night 1. So the choreography was done by an extraordinary dancer-actor, Russell Clark, who played Mel in the film, and he was on roller skates, and he did an extraordinary job. He was also the choreographer for Michael Jackson and Thriller in that whole era.
Quick question about that, what you just said, that your brother, Jerry Dandridge, do you think you guys were actual blood brothers? And I know that has different meanings being vampires, but did you think you were actual siblings, or you were vampire brother and sister?
This was my first vampire film, and in 1988 there weren't a lot of them. So I read the first Anne Rice book on Interview with a Vampire, and then I read Vampire Lestat, and then for In the Mouth of Madness I read Mountains of Madness. by H.P. Lovecraft. So that was and then I read Bram Stoker's Dracula. So based on that actors research, I built a character that I definitely Regine to be his blood sister, and it was that tribal family vengeance that has created dark stories since the beginning of time. That someone has wronged somebody that is dear to us, and then there is the belief or false belief that revenge will reduce suffering. So, anyway, but it was all done very campy, and I had a lot of history in camp. I mean, I was really young when I did Fright Night too, but I danced on Broadway in Zoot Suit, and I'd done, which wasn't campy, but it was, again, dance. My background was in dance. I danced with a company called at the Bowery Lane Theater in Lower East Side, New York, and Theater for the New City, a troupe of transvestites, and so that was still in high school, and sang Cole Porter's Love for Sale in all Deco silks. So I kind of had an early exposure to camp, and that when someone said, well, you're going to wear a red velvet gown that connects with your boots and your gloves and your collar, and it's all one piece, and you won't be able to sit for 15 hours of filming, building you a slant board, I kind of just went with it. So it was a fun project to do, and Mark Irwin was the cinematographer. I worked with him on a movie of the week that I think he was the cinematographer on another picture. I don't know if it was Fire on the Mountain with Ron Howard. Anyway, I'd work with him again another time. So yes, they were brother-sister. That's a long answer to the question, are Jerry and Regine blood brothers? Yes.
I was rewatching the movie just the other night, and I just wanted to say that Belle's scene with the roller skates and the finger painting and the blood sequence is probably one of my favorite scenes in the film. But that's obviously seconded by the infamous red leather costume that you just described, because you were saying that, and I immediately went to that scene that you were wearing it, and I was kind of as a woman trying to figure out how that worked. But of course you were gorgeous in it. And,
how the costume worked? Well, it was actually the boots were connected to the tights, like all one piece, and then that connected to a leotard that connected to the gloves, which zipped on. So basically, I couldn't take my boots off without taking my gloves off. So it was all one piece. And then he constructed with people who did bridal gowns with corsets and bones. He constructed the red silk velvet dress that went over it. That was the bodice and the skirt and everything, and that huge collar. So there were two pieces, but they basically he built a slant board, which the Joan Crawfords and women from the 1940s had slant boards so that you kind of lean against it, and it got some of the weight off your feet when you're there for 15 hours. But then at the same time, there were prosthetics on my face, and I couldn't smile because it would, in 1988, although it was Bart Mixon and Brad. So when they put the prosthetics on my face, if I moved or spoke or smiled, it would start to lift off and look less like real skin. So therefore, I couldn't interact with any of the extras that wanted to know, oh, how does that work? So they turned the
you were
slant board
quarantined to your slant board?
And Roddy McDowell was very, very generous in his advice because he had been inside the Planet of the Apes costume.
Oh, goodness.
So he knew that you really can't chit-chat with the extras when you're in that get-up, because it took 6 hours to put the makeup on and 2 hours to take the makeup off. So I'd get there around 1 or 2 in the morning for like a 6 a.m. start time. So the prosthetics, but luckily I think there were maybe 10 days of prosthetics, not too much.
Wow. That red dress that Jess brought up is really cool. You have so many costume changes in this movie, but the one in particular, the two in particular that I really liked was you're sitting on top of the car while Charlie is making out with his girlfriend. We use that picture, by the way, we use that picture. Yes, we use that picture on my website and the Facebook page where you're running your fingernails across the car, and the scene where you come to Charlie's apartment looking for your your cousin, you say, Charlie Cassidy, and you got this like.
No, I was looking for a boyfriend. But that the costume designer was Lenny Paula, and he lent me his mother's mink coat. And
Yes.
That's what I was wearing in that when I approached Charlie Brewster's door. And then later he made me Joseph Toro, the costume designer. Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't Lenny Pollock. But I think maybe he was. I think, if I remember, this was so long ago.
It's okay.
Anyway, but the costume designer, Joseph Toro, made me a jacket out of peacock feathers that he hand-sewed onto silk. I only wear that for a quick moment when I bailed Charlie out of jail. But I still have that jacket. It's a great jacket, and the hat and jacket with all these peacock feathers on it. And then once he made me wear a jacket out of monkey tails. That was some weird vintage jacket from the 20s, and I hated wearing that because I could imagine just the horror of poaching those beautiful creatures. But this is a dark character, a character that represents bloodlust, so I went with it.
I had mentioned just really quickly before I get into my own adventures in comics, the Fright Night Part 2 comic book. You said you had not read that or had not seen it?
I have one copy of it. They sent me a copy when it came out. I don't know. I don't think it ever got distributed. You know, the history of the distribution of Fright Night Part 2 I should really go into a little bit. There were high hopes for the film because Fright Night 1 did super well and it caught everybody's imagination and was really had its finger on the pulse of what people wanted to see at that time. So Fright Night Part 2 came out, and the company that distributed it was run by Menendez's father, Joe Menendez.
Okay, yeah.
The weekend after we opened, the very weekend after we opened to very high box office per box office profit, and we were opposite Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. Patrick Swayze, right. So we were opening opposite Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze, and that was the competition that weekend. So Fright Night 2 made a lot of money the first weekend, and then the Menendez brothers, who are in jail now for murdering their father, that whole thing happened. And the company kind of went into a tailspin, and nobody was out there to promote it, and there weren't screenings. So it basically just disappeared. And then it got picked up by a distribution company, but kind of lost, and it didn't have the same cinematic release success.
No, yeah, that. I was going to.
We were all really happy when this UK crew came and wanted to make a documentary of it. We've all gone on to do other things. I mean, I've done 60, 70 films and TV shows and miniseries and things since and before, but that one seems to have caught people's imagination. There's something about the Regine character that I just think there hadn't been a character like that.
Yeah, totally. Before. I mean, I sent this to your agent to say to her that Regine Dandridge, your character in Fright Night Part 2, is one of the inspirations for me to create my version of Dracula, where we gender swap the entire cast.
Yeah, it had its effect, but I also feel like it's a film that I wish it had a better run. Some films we're in, you can see that they have problems, and you can see that they're weak spots, but the Fright Night Part 2 from 1988 is one that I really wished had a better run. More of a chance. And there's a lot of original footage I hear in the documentary. I haven't seen the documentary yet, but I hear it's arrived. It was sent to an office, and I just haven't had it delivered yet.
The character, the concept of having a very glamorous, very powerful female presence in a horror movie is obviously something that I'm inspired by as an artist myself, but also just in that time frame, there weren't very many characters that were like that. It was very trend-setting in that way, and really meant a lot to a lot of, I was born the year that movie came out. So I really grew up watching a lot of those films and being really inspired by characters like like her. And also, sidebar for the distribution aspect of it, the fact that you can only find this movie on YouTube right now kind of earns it so many extra cult points. Like the fact that you can't just kind of go out and easily find it is kind of awesome for horror nerds, because it's secret, it's ours, you know. I loved it. As that character being so prevalent in creating a very strong female in a horror movie, the presence of a very strong female character, I wanted to know what other characters you may have drew from in order to get that power that Regine has.
I think what you asked is that the power that Regine has as a strong female character.
Yes.
What other
Correct.
characters I have played that inspired that kind of strength in a character?
Other actresses or characters, or even fictional characters that may have inspired that performance.
Julie, what she's asking is
that
what
may have been
what
so
what
basic
what
characters that have inspired that strength in a female character is what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that I've always been cast in these strong female characters, whether they have a political agenda or are caught in the middle of a passionate action plot. The role I did in John Cassavetes' film Gloria, which was before Fright Night Part 2, was a woman with 20 minutes to live. You know, her whole family was annihilated by the mob. So I did it with Jenna Rollins and Buck Henry. That was a very strong character, and I think after that, Hollywood didn't really know what to do with me. I won the Venice Film Festival Best Supporting Actress Award for that, and so I think in Europe they'd seen a woman in stilettos and a leopard nylon blouse pushing a shopping cart and running from the mob, but Hollywood kind of didn't know what to do with me. So I go back and forth between things I love to do in my non-acting free time, and then when there's a script with the right role, usually there's an offer because there aren't that many women in this category. The In the Mouth of Madness character was strong in that she carried a certain light as long as she could until she was overtaken by Jürgen Prochnow's character. But that also was a straight offer. There wasn't an audition. It was John Carpenter's wife, Sandy King Carpenter, was the script woman many years ago when I did a movie of the week called She's in the Army Now with Jamie Lee Curtis and Kathleen Quinlan and Melanie Griffith and I. The four of us were going through basic training around the time Private Benjamin came out. So we were all staying together in San Pedro in some army barracks, and Sandy was the script woman. And years later, I get a phone call from my agent saying, Sandy King Carpenter wants you to come over to the house and sit with her and John and see if you like this new script called In the Mouth of Madness. So I went over and we talked about, mundane things, and they offered it to me. And then there was this great 2 weeks rehearsal where Jürgen Prochnow and John Carpenter and I sat together and kind of talked about the state of civilization. And it was right before the turn of the millennium, in the late 1990s. And everybody was concerned that when the year 2000 came, the world would change, as it has. They were also concerned that at the end of many millenniums and centuries, art becomes quite perverse. And that helped tap into, it reminded me when I was in 8th grade, I did my 8th grade English thesis paper. We had a great teacher on thoughts on the morbid nature of man. So I studied Hieronymus Bosch and Ferlinghetti and Ginsberg and all these different artists who talked about morbid nature of man. So John and Jürgen and I sat for 2 weeks with this kind of dialogue in the rehearsal process, looking for what is good and evil, and how long could Linda Stiles resist the pull of getting sucked into vortex of what Sutter Kane had written. So that was kind of holding the tension in that film. Anyway, so your question about strong females, I think my mother's a strong female, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, they all had professions, baby nurses, a lot of baby nurses, a lot of doctors in my family, and teachers. So I think that I was just raised with this very, very, very strong family lineage of doing integrity and strong contributions as doctors and healthcare practitioners and teachers. So I was kind of the actor-dancer in the bunch, although there's a music line that goes through the family. So I think all of those things influence what an actor brings to a role. And then the writers of Fright Night Part 2, with Tom Holland wrote the original, and then Tim Metcalf and a writer named Miguel Tejada Flores and Tommy Lee Wallace, all four of them contributed to the writing. So that makes for a strong character, and I think you just have to rise to the occasion.
Of course. I had one other extra add-on for that. It seems like your performance in Fright Night 2 may have inspired Lady Gaga's character in American Horror Story. I'm seeing so many similarities in the way that she presented that character. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that character that she portrayed in American Horror Story, but the exuberant, very glamorous vampiress character. It's almost like she was taking tips off of Regine in her performance.
I've never seen it. I'm not much of a television person. I was raised, we had to study violin and ballet as kids. So I didn't have a TV as a kid, and I watch, now the Academy sent me like piles of screeners, so I've been watching 2 movies a night. I tend to watch a lot of foreign films. I should watch more television. There's great stuff on television. I have nothing against television. It's just I'm very much a doer. For instance, if I were into football, I'd be a football player, not a watcher. So I know that I have, just like I was inspired by Anne Rice, and then I watched The Hunger with Susan Sarandon and Catherine Deneuve. So I was inspired by them. I know and I've heard that there are, many Regine ripoffs. I don't want to say that in a disparaging way, but I'm happy about it. I'm happy that it started this kind of viral movement, as long as it holds on to the integrity of the depth of the character.
Oh, of course.
Look, I always play a character that comes from a very, very authentic, emotional reality, very rooted in reality. So, I wouldn't want to see a film that's kind of bastardized or just take the slick surface elements stylistically and not going to the core of what drives a woman to sexually taunt and then drink the blood of a sweet kid like, Charlie Brewster. Anyway, and that was with David Bowie, The Hunger. So I did see that one film before doing Fright Night Part 2. So I don't call it ripping off. I didn't rip off what Catherine Deneuve and Susan Sarandon and David Bowie were doing. It was just that got into my creative psyche.
Yeah, I mean, that's the same thing I'm doing with my comic book version of Dracula, where we turn Dracula into a woman, gender swapping it. It's, again, some of the scenes that we're doing for the comic book are slight alterations of scenes of your character from Fright Night Part 2. Mainly because the character Regine, when I watched it for the first time years ago, I was probably 12 years old or so. Excuse me, this was over 20 years ago now. I had just been so in love with that character, and held her up in your performance above all other female vampires that I've ever watched before on screen.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. It feels, actors go through all different emotional responses to people liking what they do, and people can feel like, I know a lot of comedians who are really original. They do the work, they do the homework, they write their jokes, they test their jokes, they get out there, they do their shows, and then some big name comedian is in the back of the room and grabs the joke and goes out and does it on Johnny Carson show or on TV somewhere, and the indies are end up feeling like, gee, that was my idea. But Regine Dandridge was kind of in the right place at the right time, that a lot of the people who were 8, 9, 10, 15, 16 years old who watched that when there wasn't so much media available, it really got into their zeitgeist of their creative imagination. Gee, there could be a strong woman who is who's a dancer and you know, all of the elements that Regine had. And then those people now are running studios and doing animated features, and they're out there in all levels of TV creativity. So I think that the people who have watched Rear Window, like Tom Holland was talking about how he was influenced by the horror films that he saw when he was coming up, and so he created his voice and what he wanted to express, and has had, you know, huge success. But I also believe in credit where credit is due, you know, as much as we can. In this era with social media, where images are just ripped off, it feels like the days of integrity in journalism and copyright protection, they're threatened. So, and then how does the original artist end up making a living, or if media is just constantly ripped off and splattered out there without any original credit? Business too.
Constantly.
It hurt the music business in a big way.
Yeah.
When people weren't honoring copyright.
Yeah, we also definitely plug Fright Night Part 2 among our other inspirations for my comic book. And we say this is like, you know, we in interviews I've given, as well as like in the credits of the comic, saying, you know, without like, you know, films like Fright Night Part 2 and Castlevania, the video game series, you know, there would be no, this version of Dracula where we turn her into a woman, Van Helsing, and so on and so forth, owe a lot to films like Fright Night Part 2 and so on and so forth. So, and we list, you know, the character Regine and such. Did you get a chance to check out the fan commentary I did with my film critic friend?
Yeah, where the two of you were watching the film?
Yes.
Yeah. It was tricky because there were no visuals, so it was us listening to you watching something that we weren't seeing.
Well, it's a commentary, but you're supposed to play it with the film. It's a commentary.
I see.
Yes.
Right.
So
okay.
at the beginning of the at the very
available, you know, people keep writing and they say, why isn't this on Amazon and why can't I buy this on iTunes? And I think a lot of people don't realize the complexity of the distribution world and who owns the copyright. Even Tom Holland, you know, we don't know. Is it Columbia? Is it New Century Vista? Is it, you know, who really owns the copyright of Fright Night Part 2? But I know that Gary Smart and Chris Griffiths from the UK with UK Cult Screenings, or cultscreenings.co.uk, they got the rights to use a lot of our original footage from Fright Night Part 2 that apparently is interspersed in the 3 hours of nowadays interviews where we all were interviewed on camera for that. So that's kind of why I'm doing this talk show, because I thought that it reaches that same audience that is fascinated with the original Fright Night 2, and kind of it's found its niche, it's found its cult following. And you know, Jess, for you to, as a woman, to feel like in some way it inspired you or empowered you seeing a character like Regine, that makes me happy. That's great.
Well, you definitely did. You continue to do. I also was trying to watch some other things that you had done, because I'm a big Twilight Zone fan, and I departing from Fright Night for just a millisecond, you were on a episode of the remake of Twilight Zone in the 90s?
Right, with Dee Wallace, yeah.
Yeah, Wishbank, right?
It was about Aladdin's lamp. It was just, we were at a swap meet, and both Dee Wallace's character and my character picked up Aladdin's lamp and wanted to buy it. So, anyway, I haven't seen it in a million years.
Well, I was seeing that's also on YouTube. So it's kind of like if you ever wanted to watch Fright Night 2 and random things you have done on and this interview, they are accessible on YouTube.
I
But
think
yeah,
I think the remake of the Twilight Zone, the one from the '80s that you're on, Julie, I think that's all on DVD. You can, I think, go to CBS's website and buy it.
boom.
Yeah, I mean, those are just guest stars. When I tend to actors, the bread and butter are these guest stars where they pay us for 7 days, and we show up, and there's no rehearsal time, and no costume fittings, and no camera tests, and you just jump in. I call it short order gourmet cooking. You have to be good because millions of people are guaranteed to see it because it's on a TV series. But it's not the same. You don't have the same time to build the depth of character that you have when you're working on a feature. And so the work that I am most excited about is what I spent more time doing, like Milagro Beanfield War that Robert Redford directed. We were there in True Chest, New Mexico for 4 months and lived among the people there. And then I did a movie called The Penitent with Raul Julia and Armand Asante right before the Milagro Beanfield War, and we were living in Pozos which was a deserted mining town with no running water. We were shooting there about 10,000 feet altitude. So, those kinds of experiences. And then in The Mouth of Madness, I think we were up there for 16 or 18 weeks in Toronto in the winter and shooting in the warehouse along the lake. And bitter cold.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Berlin.
You know what's funny?
With Eric Burden from The Animals.
You know what's funny is that we could do an entire other interview about In the Mouth of Madness.
Yeah, In the Mouth of Madness, because more people saw that. Yeah. It was distributed, John Carpenter directed it, it was distributed in pretty well through New Line Cinema. Michael DeLuca wrote it, who was head of production at New Line Cinema. Now he's huge, Michael DeLuca, and a very sweet person. He wrote the script for In the Mouth of Madness, but because he was working at New Line at the time, somehow in-house they didn't have a lot of faith in it, so it didn't get as much promotion as we would have liked again. But I was really thrilled with it, and I loved meeting and getting to know John Carpenter and Sandy King Carpenter. What icons of that world. John, again, I wasn't. I don't watch a lot of horror. I get scared, so I don't like sadistic horror. I like much more metaphysical horror that has an existential message that's about good versus evil. But I don't like watching. It's not that I don't like watching violence. I find that that it's up to the director and to have a certain level of responsibility, because there is a contagious factor, and people who are a little imbalanced can be overwhelmed and inspired to do bad by watching something. It almost normalizes it. So, anyway, I'm not making a statement against horror films on a radio called Radio of Horror. It's just I do believe in a level of self-censorship to make sure that what we're saying is not just violence for violence sake, because there's so much of it in the real world that I am attracted to films that have hope and that have that promote love and resilience and community and those kind of corny themes.
No, yeah, totally. Jess, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we let Julie go?
This is where I get embarrassed because I've asked all my questions. I think you are wonderful, and I think you are an inspiration, and I really hope that we can look forward to hearing more from you, and also for the release of the documentary.
Thank you. If I were to, a lot of young people who are coming into the film world find that horror films are cheaper and easier to make than other projects, and they can kind of get an audience pretty quickly in it. So I would speak to the young people and say, look at what you value, what deep down matters to you in the world. Don't worry about whether your message is commercial, so therefore it has to be violent. I would say, go to your heart and what you really value in terms of humanity and loving fellow human beings and creatures and the resources on this planet we were given, and use the film medium responsibly, because if you want people to see it, then it's going to be seen by a lot more people if it brings hope and the dark elements of killing and pain can be acknowledged and done elegantly, but I think it's within the overall narrative of what is it that we want to say and what is worthy of other people, getting other people and more people to watch your message. Like the movie Lion, I've watched it now twice on the big screen. I could watch it another 100 times. It's one of the most beautiful films ever made. It just came out with Dev Patel and Nicole Kidman.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I saw the advertisement for that.
It's really worth seeing. I hope it wins Best Picture at the Academy Awards.
Before we let you go, Julie, can you give us a little bit of a little bit of Regine in that voice that you do, which was very, very breathy and kind of like this smooth talking way?
I'll tell you about the most embarrassing moment of my life as a performer, okay? And that's a good way to end. At the time when we were shooting Fright Night Part 2, I was I was in New York, and a dancer. I was resident choreographer at Intar, and I had danced, taken classes at Eric Hawkins and Merce Cunningham and Sevilla Ford and Elio Pomari and all the great modern dance teachers in New York. So that was my route, kind of what I came from, and then I was choreographing plays off Broadway at Intar. And then I was told as a young actor, in my late teens, early 20s, that you had to be a triple threat, sing, dance, and act. So I wasn't a natural singer, so I started going every day to this music director from Man of La Mancha named Rudy Bennett, and then Jose Ferrer met me and sent me to his singing teacher, Paul Gavert, who was also Angela Lansbury and Stephen Sondheim's singing teacher. And he just did voice work where you, and no words, and Rudy Bennett was all words. So I was doing this 5 days a week. And then I get cast in Fright Night. At that time, I was trying to practice jazz singing, and because Gloria came out from Cassavetes, I got a chance to sing at a place called Picasso's, or Francois, or Picasso's, I think it was called, in the West Village, before it was the West Village, like North Soho, NoHo, and in New York. Well, Flora Purim was in the audience in this little jazz club, because she had seen Gloria, the Cassavetes film, and wanted to meet me and, hear me sing, apparently. And it was my first time on stage singing these jazz songs. And when I saw she was in the audience, it was mostly friends and family, but in a really pretty hip venue that I didn't belong in, obviously. So when we were walking out after the show, Flora Purim, my cousin told me that he overheard Flora Purim say, "She really should never sing." There's my embarrassing moment. I was really quite devastated, and I didn't sing after that. I sang a little at the end of Milagro, but thank God Flora Purim had the honesty to kill my very short-lived singing career. So the voice for Fright Night Part 2 to Regine Dandridge, I just found my lower octave. There was a Peruvian singer.
That is...
Anyway.
I mean, besides the way you are in the movie and the way you look, because you are stunningly gorgeous in that movie as a vampire, that voice is so captivating, especially when you have God, I can't remember his name, Roddy McDowall cornered in the stairwell, and you're like, let's talk about blood, Mr. Vincent, or you're trying to seduce Charlie in his bedroom. You're just the intoxicating way you talk.
Did you ever hear of the singer? I'm sure no one on your radio audience has heard of the singer named Ima Sumac.
No.
Well, another embarrassing moment, when I was studying at Neighborhood Playhouse with Sanford Meisner, we had to bring in an activity that we were so consumed with that we were only thinking about that when our scene partner knocks on the door. It's a very famous Sanford Meisner repetition exercise. And then when they knock on the door, they want something from us, and we're expecting someone else. And then the repetition exercise starts. So the activity I brought in one day as a young actor was playing the 33 LP of Ima Sumac, who is famous for her 8-octave range, and trying to lip sync to it. I was trying to do a comedy, and well, basically Sanford Meisner tarred and feathered me for that particular choice. Maybe it was too ethnically diverse for the Neighborhood Playhouse, but anyway, it ended up working because I was inspired by Ema Sumak's voice for my characters, Regine Dandridge.
Awesome. Well, Julie, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. Thank you for being in the documentary, which is amazing. And hopefully one day we will see an official release for Fright Night Part 2 that it so justly deserves.
Right. Well, with so much little to hope for in the universe right now, let's hope for that. Okay. There's my mixed political message. Okay, good luck to you. Stay healthy, and thank you.
No problem. I'll make sure your agent gets a copy of the interview once it's posted online.
Sounds good. Okay, thanks. And good luck with the editing. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
It happens. I understand. You have a good night.
Bye, Julie.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.